There's doctrine everywhere. I went onto a spiritual forum and I heard someone lectured about not taking a supplement in a gel cap because it'll plug your sacral chakra. It comes down to, where did these spiritual gurus and writers and mediums and authors who go on the lecture circuit, where do they get their information about the spirit world? Well, they get it from spirits. They channel, which I think is a very real phenomenon. The question is, how much stock do you put into what they're hearing? How much stock do they put into it? Obviously, a lot of them put enough stock into it to sell a book, which is not a crime or a sin, or even bad karma, depending. Everything is measured in frequencies of vibration while you're alive on earth and after you die. And more specifically, I'm learning that most of it is sound waves. And you don't know what the frequency of the spirit you're talking to is. You just have what the spirit says. And then they can compare notes with other mediums or books that they've read, and they can come to some unifying similarities or a universal perspective on a particular element of the spirit world. Like, you go home, you die, you go home, you go to your spirit group, you go with your guide to do a personal review where you judge yourself, they don't judge yourself, and you're so forlorn about the last life you live, you begin planning your next life, which is not something I'll be doing. In fact, I have it on good authority. From whom? From whom, John? From my spirit guide. See, this is the ultimate, my Holy Spirit's bigger than your Holy Spirit. This is what happens in church, but it starts wars. There's an Irish medium who has a guide that he calls Isaac. He wrote a book where Isaac told him that everyone in the spirit world is 33 years old. But then they turn around and say there's no time in heaven. And then later he comes out and says roughly 30s, and then says, okay, you just throw all that out the window. Nobody knows how old you are, because you present yourself your age. An example of this is in paranormal investigations. The only ones I really watch are Twin Paranormal and the Spooky Boos, Mackie and Amanda. Just because I like the chemistry of the teams. The best one I saw is when the four of them, or maybe it was just Amanda, were doing one together. They treat the spirits they talk to with respect, and that's the big litmus for me. 80% of the paranormal investigation YouTube channels and shows, the network shows, are bunkum. They're at least largely fabricated. And I don't have a problem with this either. It's not charlatanism, it's entertainment. They question these spirits, they have these devices that are quite, to me, believable. Again, the only other obstacle to overcome is what science says about it, and science says nothing about it because nobody's written them a check to say anything about it. So they're not going to. They just say, well, that's stupid. You could do that with this. That light is a piece of dust, or that orb is a piece of dust. All of these things, you can get a false positive because it's too close to a generator. Okay, but that's fine. They do a pretty good job of validating responses they get, whether it's an EVP or through the REM pod or the K2 meter, these other instruments that I think are fascinating. I've had some personal experience with those myself, but I'll share later. But I'm dipping my toe in the water of this. And you would think with people that I went to church with, I joined a satanic cult. And I'm offering, Lucifer the firstborn that I'll never have. And that's why I say it's important that you give yourself permission to investigate stuff like this. And that God would approve of it. But ultimately, I'm trying to think of a universal. I have the concept of karma, which is actually quite murky, depending. What kind of Hinduism? Are we talking about Vedic? There are all kinds of different interpretations, just like there are Baptists and Catholics and Presbyterians in church. So your job isn't to find the truth that someone hands you and adopt that. Your job is to take in all of the information, like the Bereans of the Bible, and see which things are true. And ultimately, it's going to be for you, because these other people do not take this journey with you. You do not cross the portal with another person. You die alone for a time. I was just listening to Sadhguru talk about how it's not a good idea to go into meditation under the influence of marijuana. Why? Because you can get attacked by a demon? Because it gives you false positives? Well, the purpose of weed in my life is to relax, to take a breath, and to listen to the sound of the voices in my head without shouting them down or distracting myself, but sorting them out. It's far more entertaining also. I've learned the damnedest things about myself under the influence of marijuana and deep meditation. So again, more doctrine. It's everywhere you go. And we're going back to even Zoroaster. We're going back to, even before Hindu, back to Mesopotamian, with the creation myth with Enlil and Enki and On. And there's a lot of similarities. Well, then that's a good sign that you're on a close enough path to be accurate. But we don't have the truth, with a capital T, until we cross that veil and go to the other side, where we belong, where we came from. So what do I think Earth life is? You've got some saying, oh, it's a school where you learn. Oh, it's a penal colony where you work off your karmic debt. But I really think it's just experiencing and learning. Learning, okay, you've got the school element there. But punishment can be a kind of learning. But ultimately, I think God sends us out to experience his creation and then come back and give him a wide variety of responses. And I think that would be incredibly entertaining if I had that power to create beings that could, love in the face of every reason not to. And come back and say, this is what I found out in life. This is what I thought. I think we write a story on this planet for each life we have, and we go back home and we plop it down on God's desk. Here's your TPS report. Give it to you Thursday. And God reads it and he's either entertained or he's bored. If he's bored, he's going to suggest you go back. And when you look at life that way, there's nothing that's off limits. The only thing prohibitive are those things that you notice through discernment and intuition are holding you back or damaging you. And those are the only off limits things. Even Paul says, nothing is off limits to me. Because he has his desires under control. Say what you want about Paul and us, and there's a lot I have to say about Paul. He was the guy I would want to punch in the face in high school. You can't even sin as well as Paul can, because he's the chief of all sinners. There's nothing you can do better than Paul. But he says, that thing I want to do, that thing I don't do, and the thing I don't want to do, that's the thing I do. So Paul lived the same kind of life we did. He was just honest about it. Judaism was always honest about it. The Talmud is a passage of Torah surrounded by rabbinic arguments from sages that are calling each other names. And they never do solve the problem. You have conservative Judaism has this way, Reform has this way, Hasidim have their own interpretations of it. But they're all Jewish people who serve the living God. So basically, don't follow a doctrine unless it's yours. If there must be a litmus test, let it be, is this thing that I'm about to do, not is it right or wrong, but would it do harm to my end goal? You set an end game, as I said before. Serial killer, I'm going to use an extreme example, I always do to make a point. A serial killer wants to kill 12 people by the end of the year. He's got 12 months. His math is kill a person a month, and I will be a prolific serial killer by December. But what if he kills 12 people by September? Then it can be said he's on the right track. He's making the right decisions. Obviously not for society, but for his end goal, his end game. So it's not about right or wrong. It's about, does this hamper your end game? It should include growth. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck in this cycle coming back and back and back and back. And there's your hell right there. Someone asked me where I think Bill Mahar will wake up. Well, I think, first of all, he'll wake up in shock because That's not something that was a part of his life plan. I think he'll wake up in a place like this, because I believe you go to the place you most believe in. And then at some point in his lives, he'll figure out this is some bullshit, and he'll step his game up. Maybe the next life he comes back, he chooses to believe in something spiritual. But even that alludes to or suggests that Bill Maher is on the wrong track. I don't think he is. I don't think he's on Bill Maher's track, just like I'm on John Silver's track. And you should be on your track. So that's really all I wanted to say about Doctrine is a way that society, it's a mechanism for society to feel safe. It's a mechanism created by society to make society feel safe from who? From them. But this is us, not them. It's tribalism, and all of us engage in it. And you should minimize it every single chance you can. And that is the Book of John Unbound.